This is the Superpowered Mind podcast for inquiring individuals who are tired of the struggle for peace, happiness, and clarity. I'm Claire Diamond, ready to help you explore the principles of the mind, the self, and reality to unlock ultimate mental freedom. This podcast is the one to listen to if you're ready to experience the capabilities of the superpowered mind. Hi, everybody. In last week's podcast, we looked at a really horrible question to ask ourselves in the midst of resentment. What is my equivalent? We looked at. It's a horrible question to ask ourselves, but it is ultimate liberation, really. This week, we're looking at an even more horrible question, one which on the surface has the potential to be dangerous, actually, and we need to be wary of it, and we need to understand its full power. And so this is similarly, it's a question for the situations or circumstances, the relationships in which we are feeling hard done by, or we are resentful of someone, or someone else is treating us really badly. We are putting up with a lot. We feel we're being overlooked, or we're not being respected. And it's a horrible question. The question is, how am I benefiting from this situation, directly benefiting from it? And I don't mean by that just at the surface, that there's a surface level of benefit in all situations in which there's resentment, because there is an immediate, in the midst of that resentment, there is a safe place for the ego to hang out in, which is they're wrong, I'm right. And that's made of separation. There's me here, hard done by, a victim, but nevertheless, I'm right. And my behavior is good. I'm beyond reproach. They, on the other hand, so there's me, and then there's a separation, there's a distance, there's a gap, and then there's them. And they are objectively how they appear to be. Everything that's thought about that person is real, is true, and they're wrong. If we consider that the ego is made of that belief in separation, that belief in an objectively true me, in an objectively true reality, and the reality is separate from me, and there's no relation between the two, really, other than these interactions that happen. That's like a nirvana for this sense of separation. That's a real ego stabilising space. It's temporary, of course, because the ego is made of unachievable wants. And so that moment of feeling good, feeling right, feeling valid, completely temporary. It's the hit of a heroin high, and then it's gone. And then we're back in the chase for it. So it's that moment of being right in the midst of resentment is a high that will never last. And we can spend our entire lives chasing the more permanent, solid version of it. We'll never, ever find it. So in the midst of that resentment, there's this surface value of stabilizing in that rightness, in that validity. I'm talking about something even more, like there's an even bigger benefit to remaining in this situation as the victim, an even bigger benefit than just the surface value of rightness. And that is a level of profound protection and defense, and a space in which we can avoid acting. And that is a hidden benefit. If we think of every single situation in which we are resentful, the fact that it's continuing means that there is some benefit for the ego in terms of its security of lack of exposure, really. We could look at it this way. It really, what it allows for the psychological experience of being to remain in a childlike state, not taking responsibility, not taking accountability or ownership. And this is really tough to look at, because in these situations that come up, we really do feel as though the people or the world or the circumstances are really against us, that people are behaving so unfairly towards us. And nevertheless, when we start to ask ourselves, what is actually the benefit of remaining in this? And I'm not talking about, obviously, situations in which there is no possibility of physical escape. But when there is a level of physical freedom, what is the actual benefit to me of remaining in this situation? And when we are able to look at that question, it is an enormous mental shift because the mind is forced to shift out of the childlike state, helpless and hopeless, full of unachievable wants that can never be met, into a space in which choice is acknowledged. And this is an interesting area for us, choice, because we're considering that there is all the time that there's no chooser, but choices are being made all the time. Choices are being made. And what is the benefit of remaining in this situation? That question forces attention onto the choices that are originating here. And it changes the perspective of the situation as it becomes a situation that I am choosing, which is so confronting. It's so confronting to the ego that might have been getting all of its stability from the identity of being a victim. And I've certainly done this myself, really recognize this. And it might have been having so much attention, so much sympathy, so much help, support. I'm the victim, they're the villain. And this is what, I'm helpless and hopeless in this situation. And so in comes this podcast or something else that says, well, how are you benefiting? What is the real intrinsic essential benefit to you of staying? Because there will be one. Otherwise, action would have been taken and the situation would change. So let's look at some examples. If we took, say, a marriage. So say I'm married and my husband is having affairs. And I've found out about the affairs and he promises to stop and he doesn't stop. And so here I am in this marriage, which no longer represents what a marriage is, no longer is what I signed up for, yet here I am still in it. And each day I'm sort of getting lower and lower and lower. Every day is a confrontation of how far from what I want this really is, and yet I'm staying. So why am I staying? What is the benefit to me of staying? And we could really list so many benefits if we're really honest with ourselves. Instead of being, I have to stay, I don't have any choice, we shift the inner analysis to why is the choice being made to stay here? What is the benefit? And then we start looking like, actually, my life is so much more comfortable with his salary. I would lose this house and I love this house. I would, if we broke up, some friends would go with him and I would lose those friends. We start to really see what is the actual sort of real world benefits of remaining in a situation that we resent. And the freedom of doing this is that those choices which are being made, again, there isn't really a chooser. These choices are being made because given everything that's believed, everything that's understood, these are optimum. And so turning the attention to the choices means they become very transparent. They get brought up into the light. And once things are up in the light, they come out of the subconscious mind. So while we're, the victim, I've got no choice. This is my life. This is what I have to do. He's awful. I have to put up with it. Everything remains in the subconscious. All the sort of hidden psychological mechanisms that are going on that are maintaining me in this situation are out of visibility. They can't be seen. And all that can be seen is the resentment, the resistance, I'm so frustrated and fed up, and I'm telling all my friends and telling my family. But underneath the surface are the reasons for why I'm staying here. And when attention is put on those reasons, there's this entirely practical world that starts to emerge. There's a very logical, practical series of processes that are saying stay. And once they're seen, they can't be unseen. Once it starts to be acknowledged, well, I'm staying here because of his salary right now. That is so humbling to acknowledge, and such freedom, because now this is about money. And there's a choice being made about money, or there's a choice being made about friendships, or a choice being made about house or street or town, and then because it's made transparent, and because now attention is focused on real world stuff, and because it's no longer that interesting just to spend all of that incredible intellectual power feasting on hopeless and helpless situations. Instead, now we've got actual problems. It's so good to have actual problems because they can be really specific. And the mind, once it gets a specific problem, is really set free. That's what it loves to do, is to work out solutions. And so the problem could become, I want a marriage that is monogamous. This isn't. So this isn't going to work for me. Either he changes his behavior or it's over. And I want to have this standard of living. I need to earn this amount of money. I need to somehow guarantee this monthly income, whatever it is. And that becomes the challenge. That is an awesome challenge for the mind. We're now in the realm of achievable wants. How does that happen? I want a divorce and I want to keep my friends. I want a divorce, I want to stay in the house. These are achievable wants. We can really start using the entire fullness of all the resources available to solve the problem. And because the mind is shifted into ownership of choices, it can't hang out in resentment anymore. It's just, resentment isn't available. It's not an option. And that is so liberating for the entire brain, body, mind. Resentment is an incredibly toxic, debilitating, false state to be in, because it's based around an imaginary idea, really. It's based on choices that are too confronting to acknowledge. It's staying as a child. It's staying as the past learnings, when really all the resources are clamoring to be set free in the present to deal with real-time problems. And so asking ourselves, what is the actual benefit of staying? And it could, another example could be at work, we might be passed over for a promotion, or one of our siblings, say in our family, is asking us for money or help, and we find ourselves just stuck in this situation, giving this money that we don't want to give. Or at work, we're doing this job and we feel resentful that people are being promoted over us. But what is the benefit for me? If we keep asking that over and over and over again, the choices start to emerge. They come into consciousness. That's the process. From the hidden subconscious realm, these choices become conscious. Doesn't mean that there's an individual chooser. It means that what we are, consciousness, witnesses the choices. And now because they're available, because they're out in the world as form, the mind can work with them. The mind can treat them as problems to be solved. And that is extremely liberating. So it's a difficult question to ask, and don't ask it of anyone else. This is one just for ourselves. We're absolutely not going to go around, when people are stuck and they're feeling so awful. We're not going to tell them what's the benefit for you of being here. This is one for ourselves. We ask ourselves everywhere where we're resentful. We do that for ourselves. And to everyone else, we just listen. We just listen to what's going on for them. But for ourselves, we can get very direct, very honest, very humble, and it's completely liberating. And it's amazing how everything starts to change around that space, because that spell of resentment that was fixing in place this reality of self and the reality of other is broken. And because the mind is now in reality, magical reality starts to operate. And it's incredible what changes happen from there. So yeah, let's just ask ourselves that when we're ready. It's a breakthrough question. Yeah, lots of love. Bye. Thank you for listening to Superpowered Mind with me, Claire Diamond. If you want extra support in the exploration of your mind, download our exclusive subliminal recording, especially for podcast listeners, on bit.ly/podcast subliminal.